My son demanded $250,000 from me. And less than 24 hours later, I was gone. Not dead, not missing, just gone from his life. 3 hours after that phone call, I was sitting in a solicitor's office in downtown Melbourne, signing documents that would rewrite my entire future. And by the time my son showed up at my home the next morning, expecting a check the size of a small mortgage, he found the locks changed, the driveway empty, and an envelope taped to the front door. Inside that envelope was a single sheet of paper that made him scream so loud the neighbors stepped onto their verandas, wondering what kind of storm had hit our quiet street. Before I tell you what was written on it, and why a father finally stepped out of his son's shadow, tell me where you're listening from, and check whether you're subscribed, because this is a story you might understand more than you want to admit. 40 days earlier, if someone had told me I'd one day disappear from my own son's life, I would have laughed a tired little laugh, the kind a man gives when he's lived long enough to believe he's seen everything. I was 63 then, retired from a lifetime of mechanical engineering, living alone on the outskirts of Geelong. My days were quiet, predictable, safe. I'd wake early, slip into the garage, and work on a piece of jarrowwood sanding, shaping, slowing my thoughts enough that I could forget the ache of losing my wife, Margaret. She'd passed from cancer 3 winters earlier, and grief had its own stubborn rhythm. It clung to the corners of the house, the chipped mugs she loved, the soft cardigan hanging behind the door. Woodworking became my way of staying upright, of keeping my hands busy so the rest of me wouldn't fall apart. My son, Ethan, was all I had left family-wise. 34 years old, ambitious, charming when he wanted to be, always in a hurry, always chasing something just out of reach. We used to be close, or at least I thought we were. The truth was, somewhere along the way, I had mistaken familiarity for closeness, and silence for peace. It was a Tuesday evening when the phone rang. I was in the garage, sanding the edge of an old table I'd found at a community sale near Ballarat. The late-day sun was slanting in through the open door, warm and copper-colored. When I answered, Ethan's voice sliced through all of that warmth. "Dad, we need to talk. Tomorrow morning. It's important." Mad. There was a tension underneath his words. Sharp, impatient. The same tone he used when he crashed my truck at 17, when he overspent on a condo renovation at 25, when he quit his job at 29 because he was meant for more. It's a hadda bada. I felt something inside me shift, but I kept my voice steady. "Sure, son. Come by whenever you like." 5 says. 10 Claire's coming too. We'll explain everything then. At a timers. Claire. His wife, of nearly 9 years. Stylish, polished, always dressed in a way that reminded you of how expensive everything had become. They lived well, far better than their income should allow, but I had learned to swallow my questions. A parent tells himself things are fine long after they've stopped being fine. The next morning, they pulled into my driveway in a spotless white SUV, one of those cars that hums instead of idles. Ethan stepped out wearing a blazer, Claire with a leather folder tucked under her arm, both of them walking with that clipped determination of people heading into a pitch meeting. "Coffee's ready," I said, though none of us touched it once we sat down. We gathered in the living room, a room Margaret had loved. Soft blankets, warm light, framed photos of Ethan growing up. Looking at those photos felt like looking into someone else's life entirely. Ethan leaned forward. "Dad, I'll be direct. My business is in trouble. We need a bridge loan. $250,000. To be work." He said it like he was reciting a number from a brochure. Claire opened her folder, spreading spreadsheets across my coffee table, colored charts, predictions, projected revenue. They talked about growth opportunity, cash flow delay, venture contracts in Melbourne. The words came smoothly. Too smoothly. The way someone talks when they've practiced the speech in front of a mirror. I listened, my hands tightening around my mug as the weight of the number settled into me. $250,000. A lifetime of saving. A lifetime of doing things the slow, honest way. "Why me?" I asked quietly. Ethan didn't blink. "Because we've tried everything else. Banks, investors, lines of credit. No one will help us. You're the only one who can." The only one. Not Would I consider it? Not could I think about it. The only one. Something cold inched along the back of my neck. I asked to see their contracts real. Signed agreements. I asked about their ABN, their registered office, their clients. Questions any lender would ask. Questions any father, before giving away a lifetime of security, had every right to ask. Their answers were vague. Rushed. Claire spoke faster. Ethan grew frustrated. Dad, we don't have time for paperwork. We need the funds by Thursday. If we can't make payroll, the whole thing collapses. Has way with too private, payroll, deadlines. Pressure. Always the pressure. I told them I needed the night to think. A simple, reasonable request. Yet the look they exchanged told me they hated that answer. Claire's jaw tightened. Ethan's foot tapped against the floor. But they forced polite smiles, hugged me stiffly, and left. When the door closed, the silence felt heavier than usual. I walked to the kitchen, sat at the table Margaret once embroidered placemats for, and stared at nothing. I didn't drink. I didn't move. I just listened to the hollow part of myself whispering that something was terribly wrong. By midnight, I accepted that sleep wouldn't come. So I did what any man does when instinct starts to burn through denial. I began to check things. Quietly, methodically, piece by piece. And within hours, everything I believed about my son began to crack. I'm not sure when the fear turned into certainty. But by the time the sun rose, I knew this much. If I didn't protect myself, I would lose everything I had left. By the time Ethan called me the next day, I already knew what my answer had to be. But hearing his voice pushed something sharp through my chest. Dad? So? Can you help us out? We have to. He sounded impatient, like he was asking whether I'd picked up milk from the store, not whether I was prepared to drain a lifetime of savings. I need to understand the details, I said carefully. Your consulting firm show me the signed contracts, the bank statements, proof of revenue, anything that shows the business is real. End quote. Dachin. With my comment again, there was a long, loaded silence. Dad, he said finally, this isn't about paperwork. It's about trust, and trust, I replied, is built on truth. The 710. His tone snapped. We don't have time for this. Payroll is Friday. It's already Wednesday. If we don't pay the staff, everything collapses. I told you this. This picture. The urgency felt rehearsed. Too clean. Too orchestrated. No, Ethan, I said quietly. My answer is no. There is and. The explosion was immediate. You're going to let my business fail? You're going to let me fail? I can't believe this. I thought you cared. I thought. He stopped, breathed hard into the phone, and then delivered the one line he knew would cut deeper than anything else. Mom would be ashamed of you. I felt those words like a split across my ribs. Margaret had worked overtime shifts, skipped vacations, worn the same winter coat for 6 years, just so Ethan could join hockey teams, attend summer camps, apply to the university he chose. For him to use her memory like that, a coldness I didn't recognize spread through me. Don't you ever use your mother to manipulate me. That's drag. He hung up. 30 minutes later, my phone rang again. Claire. This time her voice wasn't smooth or professional. It was sharp, brittle. Richard, I don't know what Ethan said, but you're making a terrible mistake. We trusted you. We came honestly. No, I said. You came expecting. That's different. It sewed. She bristled. You think we're lying? We showed you projections. We showed you numbers. We offered interest, for heaven's sake. Happen, Douay. Where are your children, Claire? The question caught her off guard. What does that have to do with anything? Without in 25, you've been married almost a decade. Never once heard you or Ethan talk about wanting kids. Now I'm wondering why. And that, she hissed, is none of your business. It stayed Stowler. It is, I said. When you're asking me for $250,000, children require stability. You can't afford stability. You can't even afford your own lifestyle. Well, minus. You arrogant. I'm not giving you the money, Claire. And I think you knew that before you ever walked through my door. Appsline. There was a jagged inhale on the other end of the line. You'll regret this, she said, and hung up. Hours later, an email arrived from Ethan. Subject line. Final chance. The message was long, but the parts that mattered were simple. Transfer $250,000 by 9 a.m. tomorrow, or accept that you've chosen money over your son. Once you make this choice, there is no going back. He had CC'd Claire and his closest friend, presumably as a witness to my betrayal. I stared at the screen for a long time, then forwarded the email to a solicitor I had worked with years earlier when Margaret passed. Her name was Amelia Harper, a calm, precise woman who had a way of cutting through chaos like it was fog. "Come in first thing tomorrow," she said after reading the message. "We'll protect you." Actioned. That night, sleep didn't even try to visit. I sat at the dining table Margaret once decorated for Christmas, her favorite candles still faintly scented with vanilla. The house felt too big, its walls echoing with memories that no longer comforted me. Somewhere between 2 and 3 in the morning, I whispered into the quiet, "What happened to you, Ethan? When did you stop being my son and start becoming my responsibility?" Ada. I didn't know, but I knew what I had to do. Adopta. I walked into Amelia's office, with the email printed out and folded in my jacket pocket. She greeted me with a warm but steady expression, the kind of expression you expect from someone who's seen families come apart one signature at a time. "Let's start with the basics," she said gently. "Your assets, your retirement, your home, too." When Waitep held her, I told her everything. My savings, the house Margaret and I had paid off slowly over 3 decades, the retirement fund I had guarded like a fragile bird. Amelia listened, taking notes quickly, methodically. Then, she leaned back in her chair. "Richard, your son and daughter-in-law are attempting to pressure you into a financial transfer under emotional duress. That alone is concerning. But the structure and urgency suggest something more. I recommend moving your house into an irrevocable trust and restructuring your accounts immediately." It is nowhere. Her words settled into me with a strange mixture of sadness and relief. "What does that mean for Ethan?" I asked. "It means he can't touch your estate. Not now. Not without meeting clear, legally defined conditions. And it protects you from any accusation of incompetence or undue influence." "It's Telvin Gravitt." "Incompetence?" I repeated. Amelia's eyes softened. "It happens more often than you'd think. Adult children claiming a parent isn't mentally fit to manage their own money. It's ugly, but it's real." Something inside me tightened. Would Ethan really go that far? She slid a stack of papers toward me. "Before we file anything, Richard, I need to ask, are you ready for the consequences? Once this is done, your son can't reverse it." Actions. I looked down at the documents pages of legal language and safeguards, all spelling out one truth. If I didn't sign, I would lose everything. If I did sign, I might lose my son forever. My hands trembled slightly as I picked up the pen, and as the ink began to touch the page, something inside me broke quietly, like a thin branch under winter frost. But something else took its place, a steadiness I hadn't felt in years. I signed. When I stepped out of Amelia's office into the crisp Melbourne air, something felt different. Not lighter, not happier, but clearer. A father's love shouldn't require self-destruction. And for the first time in my life, I stopped letting Ethan define what I owed him. When I got home from Amelia's office, the house didn't feel like my house anymore. Something had shifted. Or maybe it was me who had shifted. I walked through each room slowly, touching the back of the armchair where Margaret used to read, the chipped corner of the hallway table Ethan had knocked into when he was 10, the doorway where we marked his height in pencil every birthday. All of it felt like it belonged to a life that was already ending. By late afternoon, I knew there was one thing left to do before Ethan came banging on my door again. I needed answers. Real answers, not the glossy lies wrapped in spreadsheets Claire had printed. So I started digging, not out of anger, but out of necessity. The first step was simple. I looked up the ABN for the business consultancy Ethan claimed to run. The registry showed it had been created only 7 months earlier. No filings, no notes, no history. It was a shell with a name, nothing more. I checked the so-called office address he had mentioned. Google Maps showed a commercial building downtown, but when I zoomed in, the suite number listed on the company website didn't exist. It jumped from 214 to 216. No 215 inches between. No trace of Ethan's firm anywhere on the building directory. My stomach tightened. Still, I wanted more than digital proof. I wanted something undeniable. I called Lewis, an old friend who had retired from accounting in Ballarat. He had the kind of mind that could smell dishonesty in a spreadsheet the same way a carpenter can smell rot in timber. "Send me everything they gave you," he said. "I'll take a look." There with Privacy. Within half an hour, my email dinged. Subject: Richard. This isn't good. I opened his message slowly. "These projections aren't projections," Lewis wrote. "They're templates downloaded from a business plan generator. The numbers don't follow standard revenue models. And the chart formatting, Richard. Two of the graphs still have watermarks from a software trial version. It's 70s sign." I leaned back in my chair. Breath caught in my throat. Not sloppy. Not careless. Desperate. Lewis followed up with a phone call. "Mate, this isn't a business that's in trouble. This is a business that doesn't exist. I closed my eyes, pressing two fingers to my temple. "And the payroll?" I asked. "There is no payroll. No employees registered. No deductions. Nothing. An entreatement. A very two." My chest tightened. So what would the $250,000 be for? Their prize. There was a pause. And then Lewis exhaled. "Credit cards, personal loans, luxury spending. Richard, I'm sorry, but I think your son and daughter-in-law are drowning in debt." Oh, 10. Another message popped through from Ethan while I was still on the call. A single line. "Did you think about what I said? We need the money. Now." I stared at those words. The tone. The entitlement. The lack of any acknowledgement of the documents I'd asked for. Something inside me hardened. Still, I needed more. Something concrete. Something physical. I went back through old messages Ethan had sent months earlier. Buried deep in our thread, I found a PDF he once forwarded me by accident, a bank document he'd meant to send to Claire. It showed overdraft fees, missed payments, a credit line exhaustion warning. The timestamp was from last year. This wasn't a sudden crisis. It was a long, slow collapse, hidden behind polished smiles and expensive clothes. But the moment that broke me came later that night. I checked the footage from my doorbell camera, something I rarely did. The files stored automatically, month after month. Out of some instinct I didn't yet understand, I clicked back to the week before Ethan's visit. There he was, on my front porch, looking around before trying the door handle. Not knocking, not calling, testing. Testing whether the door was locked, testing whether I was home, testing if he could get inside. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. Because Ethan wasn't just checking the door. He walked around the house, past the windows, toward the garage where I kept my documents, my tax papers, the trust information from years ago, old insurance files. He rattled the side door. It didn't open, but he tried. When the footage ended, I sat motionless, staring at the frozen frame of my son standing at that door. My son, trying to get into a house he didn't own, a house he might have planned to use as collateral, or worse, as evidence in some story about my declining judgment. Cries. I didn't sleep. Not a minute. Not after seeing him like that. At dawn, I drove straight to Amelia's office again. She hadn't even taken her coat off when I walked in. "Richard," she said gently, "you look pale. What happened?" End quote. I handed her my tablet. "Watch." Attic. She watched the footage silently, her brows drawing together. "This confirms everything," she said finally. He wasn't preparing to pitch a business. He was preparing to build a case. Incompetence, vulnerability, undue influence. He may have been planning to argue that you were unfit to manage your own estate. There. Died. My throat tightened. He would claim that about his own father. End quote. D-teens Ben. "This kind of financial pressure," she said softly, "can make people justify anything." And instead, I sank into the chair across from her. "What do I do now?" Every 15. She slid a file toward me several inches thick. "Today, we transfer your house into the irrevocable trust. We restructure your retirement. We open a secondary account he doesn't know about. And, Richard, we prepare for the possibility that he'll come to your door." Wrecker. I nodded slowly, feeling a mixture of grief and clarity wash through me. I never thought I'd have to protect myself from my own child. 8. She touched my arm gently. You're not protecting yourself from your son. You're protecting yourself from his choices. One of that was never company way. Her words hit me harder than I expected. When the paperwork was done, and the trust officially created, I stepped outside into the Melbourne air. The clouds hung low, heavy with rain that hadn't fallen yet. I stood there for a long time, listening to the distant sound of trams, the city waking around me. I had protected everything, except the one thing I had no control over: what Ethan would do next. And as it turned out, I didn't have long to wait. Ethan didn't call before showing up. He didn't text. He didn't even pretend to be calm. At exactly 3 in the afternoon, I heard the familiar crunch of tires on my driveway. I looked out the window and saw him step out of the SUV, with Claire trailing behind him. He marched straight to the door and shoved his key into the lock, only to find it wouldn't turn. He jiggled it harder, tried again, then again. The moment he realized it had been changed, the air around him shifted. He pounded the door. Dad, open up. I know you're in there. Nadam. I walked to the door and unlatched only the screen, leaving a thin boundary between us, a boundary that felt symbolic in a way I wished it didn't. The deadline passed, Ethan said sharply. Are you really choosing money over me? ATs. No, I answered. I'm choosing reality over fantasy. I'm choosing not to hand over $250,000 based on lies you expect me to accept without question. End quote. He stared at me, eyes burning with something between anger and disbelief. Claire stepped forward. We'll take you to court, she said. We'll claim elder financial abuse. We'll prove you're not competent to manage your finances. Well, I should have been afraid. But instead, a strange calm spread through me. Good luck with that, I said gently. I've already completed a full cognitive evaluation this morning. Passed everything. My house is in an irrevocable trust. My accounts are protected. My will has been updated. You can't manipulate me anymore. End quote. For a moment, silence hung thick between us. Then Ethan's voice dropped to something cold. What did you do? 12 O's. I protected myself, I said. And I protected what your mother and I spent a lifetime building. Frant. His jaw clenched so tightly I could see the muscles shift. You've lost your mind. LA. No, Ethan, I whispered. I finally found it. Rives. I think. Claire tugged his arm. He's not going to help us. Let's go. Will him together. They turned away, but Ethan looked back over his shoulder. When you're old and sick and need someone to take care of you, don't call me. You'll be alone. As well. I expect nothing less, I replied. When they drove away, something inside me cracked, not loud, not violent, just a small, heartbreaking tear in a place that had already been wounded for a long time. I leaned against the door frame, letting the weight of the moment settle into me. 5 days later, my house sold. 40,000 over asking, quick possession, clean paperwork. I accepted the offer without hesitation. The day the sale closed, I packed my essentials into 2 suitcases. Everything else, Margaret's dishes, the furniture we'd bought together, Ethan's childhood trophies, went to charity. I kept only my woodworking tools. They were the only things that still felt like they belonged to me. Then I left Geelong and drove straight toward the coast. I settled in Apollo Bay, renting a modest cottage tucked behind a line of gum trees. The ocean was close enough that I could hear the waves at night, soft and steady, like a heartbeat I hadn't noticed in years. For the first time since Margaret died, I woke up without feeling like the walls were pressing in on me. I spent mornings walking the shoreline, afternoons sanding reclaimed wood in the garage, evenings talking with neighbors who waved as if they'd known me forever. Simple people, honest people, the kind who don't ask questions you're not ready to answer. For a while, it was peaceful, quiet, healing, but peace doesn't stay untouched forever. One evening, just as the light turned orange over the bay, my phone buzzed. It was Amelia. Richard, she said. You should know. Ethan contacted me. He wants to see the trust terms. It said Dine. He can't, I said. I know, I informed him. He didn't take it well. But that's not the only thing. Claire filed for divorce yesterday. He was. I sat down hard on the porch step. Amelia continued quietly. The documents show Ethan was hiding nearly $200,000 of debt from her. Personal loans, credit cards, a line of credit on their home. This wasn't a business collapse. This was lifestyle collapse. It is rezzicant. Lifestyle collapse. The phrase sat heavy in my chest. What happens now? I asked. Well, according to the filing, Ethan moved in with Claire's parents. Not with you. That is the diary. A dry, humorless breath left me. Of course he did. 8. You didn't do anything wrong, Richard, she said. Setting boundaries isn't cruelty. 2. As it, I wanted to believe her. I really did. That night, I walked down to the water. The moon hung low, rippling across the dark surface. A couple walked by with their dog, and I found myself smiling when the dog trotted over to sniff my hand. The simple warmth of that moment. The unearned kindness. It steadied something inside me. In Apollo Bay, no one knew me as the man whose son demanded $250,000. No one knew me as the quiet widower who had lost too much. I was just a man rebuilding, plank by plank, day by day. But even in the soft rhythm of this new life, a shadow lingered, an unanswered question, a thread tugging at the back of my mind. Did Ethan regret what he'd done? Or did he simply regret failing to get what he wanted? I didn't know, and part of me wasn't sure I ever would. But life has a way of circling back, even when you're not ready for it. And Ethan was closer to returning than I realized. Autumn had begun to settle over Apollo Bay when the message finally came. A simple text. Dad, can we talk? I stared at it for a long time. Not out of anger, but because I needed to understand what kind of conversation he wanted. An apology? Another request? A chance to rewrite the past? 3 days later, I wrote back. Call me. Saturday afternoon. He phoned exactly at 2. Dad? Expected. His voice was thinner, almost unrecognizable. I wanted to apologize. For everything I said. For everything I did. End quote. 2 there with end. I didn't speak right away. I let the silence stretch just long enough that he understood apologies matter only when they're carried, not thrown. He continued, voice trembling. Claire left. She found out about the debt. She said she couldn't do it anymore. Those. With Con. I closed my eyes. I'm sorry, son. End quote. I've been going to therapy, he said quickly, as if afraid I'd hang up before he finished. Financial counseling. Real counseling. I've been lying to myself for years, pretending I was successful, pretending I didn't need help, and then pretending I deserved yours. His breathing shook. The business wasn't real, Dad. I mean, I tried. I wanted it to be real. But I didn't know what I was doing. And when I lost my job, I panicked. I told Claire I quit to start something new. And then I just kept lying until it swallowed everything. It's Tattlers. Somewhere in his voice was the boy who used to follow me around the shed asking how tools worked. The boy who wanted to build things. Where are you living now? I asked. With Claire's parents, he said quietly. On their pull-out couch. I'm working retail. Minimum wage. Sometimes, I can't believe how far I've fallen. Rate? You didn't fall, Ethan, I said gently. You landed. There's a difference. It said it. He let out a choked laugh that cracked halfway through. Dad, do you think you could ever forgive me? Not now. But someday? Thanks for watching. I looked out toward the shoreline, where the waves pushed against the sand in slow, steady breaths. I remembered Margaret once telling me, forgiveness isn't a gift, it's a decision you remake every day. I forgave you the day I left Geelong, I said softly. Forgiveness was never the problem. I just couldn't keep enabling you. With that I won. He cried, then quiet. Broken sobs he tried to muffle. I didn't rush him. I didn't speak over him. I just listened, letting the weight of what we'd both lost sit between us, and letting the possibility of something new settle in its place. We talked for almost an hour. He told me about his debt recovery plan, about the job, about how humiliating it felt to rebuild from the ground up, and how, strangely, it was the most honest life he'd lived in years. Before we hung up, he whispered, someday, When I've saved enough, could I come visit you? There's Tennel's guide. I'd like that, son, I said. Whenever you're ready. To that. Months passed. Winter came, and I learned the quiet joy of cold mornings, with a hot mug on the porch. I fixed old chairs for neighbors, joined a woodworking group, helped repair a playground bench outside the community hall. People started waving when they saw me in town, not because they knew my story, but because here, I wasn't defined by it. Then, one morning in September, Ethan messaged again. I think I'm ready. Can I come this weekend? I picked him up at the bus stop. He looked older, thinner. His eyes didn't have that restless shine anymore. He wore plain clothes, no slick brands, no pretense, and he carried a small backpack that looked like it held everything he truly owned. Thanks for letting me come, he murmured. Your home is always open, I said. Just, not the old one. I don't live there anymore. It's not Hevnotament. A small smile tugged at his mouth. Fair enough. Talabide. Activelied. That weekend, we worked side by side in the garage. I showed him how to sand a piece of reclaimed timber, how to follow the grain, how the wood tells you what it wants to become, if you're patient enough to listen. At one point, he paused, running his hand along the surface. I forgot how much I used to love this, he whispered. Building something real. It has a finally word. We talked about his therapy sessions. He didn't hide anything, not the shame, not the fear, not the nights he lay awake wondering who he had become. There was honesty now. And humility. Two things I hadn't seen in him in years. On Sunday evening, as he packed his bag, he handed me an envelope. What's this? I asked. Just open it, Dom. Inside was a check. $500. My eyebrows lifted. Ethan, it's not repayment, he said quickly. I know I can never repay everything you and Mom gave me. This is just symbolic. It's the first money I've saved since starting over. I needed to do this to prove to myself I can give, not just take. They didn't. Something warm swelled in my chest, something I hadn't felt since he was a boy handing me a crooked wooden birdhouse he built in the shed. I'm proud of you, I said. More than you know. Dies. His eyes glistened. Yeah, I'm trying, Dad. I really am. We can't, daughter. After he left, I deposited the check, and then matched it with a donation to a cancer support fund in Margaret's name. It felt right. Like closing a circle. Like honoring the part of her that had always believed Ethan would learn eventually what truly mattered. Seasons passed. Ethan visited again, then again. He got promoted to shift supervisor. Finished an accounting course online. Found a modest apartment with roommates. Started dating someone steady, grounded, kind. Each time he came to Apollo Bay, he seemed a little more like the son I remembered, and a little more like the man I had always hoped he would become. On what would have been Margaret's 65th birthday, he asked if we could visit her grave together. We hadn't done that since the funeral. He brought flowers. I brought a photo of the three of us. Standing there, he whispered, "Do you think she forgives me?" And I rested my hand on his shoulder. She forgave you long before you did anything wrong. But she also would have agreed with what I did. Sometimes, love means saying no. Abs. He nodded slowly, tears slipping down his face. Thank you for not giving me the money, he whispered. For walking away. For making me face myself. It was the best thing you ever did for me. I'd do that. With Compat at 9. I looked at him. Really looked at him. And saw not the desperate man who once demanded $250,000, but the boy Margaret and I had raised, the one who still existed under the rubble of his own mistakes. Sometimes, I said softly, love isn't about saving someone. It's about stepping back so they can learn to stand. Without a different lure, the perdications, the wind moved through the trees around us. Gentle, like a quiet agreement. So tell me, would you forgive them? Or would you choose justice? Subscribe for the next true Canadian family story, and let me know. You're listening from which city? Which corner of Canada today?